Let's go to London now, where I'm joined by Patrick Lohlein. He's the national organizer for the campaign group Conservatives for a People's Vote. Bilal Mahmood is a former parliamentary candidate for Labour and is now the vice chair of Labour in the City, a social group for Labour members and supporters. And Roger Alton is a journalist and contributing editor at the Daily Mail. Gentlemen, I thank you very much for joining us. Roger, let me start with you. Was Theresa May a failure?
Well, I don't think she's been a great success. I think she did a lot of slightly admirable things pressing on, but I don't think she's going to be remembered as one of the great prime ministers. I mean, she had to refer to various achievements, a bit about plastic straws and a little bit about instituting an inquiry into Grenfell, which hardly count as great achievements. I mean, anybody would have instituted an inquiry into Grenfell. I think she was dealt an impossible hand, which she then didn't play very well.
Patrick, has Brexit, in a way, done a lot of damage to the Tories?
Absolutely. It's done a lot of damage to the country and to the Conservative Party. We saw with the resignation of the Prime Minister, she was dealt an impossible card, as Roger just said. And there really is no, I cannot see any way she could have done much better, except possibly earlier on by reaching out to the other side, by talking to the other parties, because we have to remember that Brexit was not just a vote from the Conservative Party, but from people from all kind of parties across the country.
Bilal, when we look at what comes next,
failed to do that.
Certainly, Bilal, when we look at what comes next, it's not just about who becomes the next Prime Minister, but it's also about who gets to choose who becomes the next Prime Minister, and that's happening within a very ring-fenced Tory party, right? So when I give you some names, Bilal, Andrea Leadsom, Dominic Raab, Penny Mordaunt, Michael Gove, Jeremy Hunt, Matt Hancock, Rory Stewart, Sajid Javid, Boris Johnson, any of these names excite you as potentially your next Prime Minister?
In a word, no. I think that these are difficult times without these strange circumstances occurring. But I think that the nature of the parliamentary system in the UK means that with the Conservative Party, the Tory MPs will be responsible for shortlisting their candidates for the wider membership of the Conservative Party to choose who is our eventual Prime Minister. Conventionally, one would think that a general election should follow to allow that leader to be endorsed by the public.
Is that a natural progression,
Yes.
given the chaos? Certainly, Roger, given the chaos of the past 3 years, many people saying waste of money, waste of time, waste of energy, we need a fresh general election after Theresa May goes. Is that a fair argument, Roger?
I think it's a very fair argument. The point is, as the other speakers have said, the next Prime Minister is essentially going to be appointed by 100,000 members of the Conservative Party. It's an appointment. It's not an election. It's tremendously undemocratic. So this small group of people, largely elderly, even older than I am, are going to be appointing the next leader of this country. It seems to me grossly weird, and I think there's a constitutional deficit involved. So the next Prime Minister, the next Tory leader, will come in looking after a House of Commons where you haven't got a majority, where you're having to deal with an issue which has been rejected time after time after time after time. And there is a serious problem about how you're supposed to rule. So I think you have to have a general election. If I was the Queen, and obviously I'd like to be, but if I was the Queen, I should be perfectly entitled to say, are you sure you can run the country, old chap? Maybe have a general election.
Okay, so Patrick, if this goes according to plan, the 120,000 or so Tories, if they choose the best candidate based on who's available, it could be quite likely that that would be Boris Johnson. He's perfectly placed as a Tory. How do you feel about that?
Well, I mean, it could be Boris Johnson. Whoever it is going to be, it is likely to be somebody who's pandering to the membership. As Roger just said, we've done 100,000 or so Conservative Party members, most of whom are quite elderly. And they are the ones having a say. And among the membership, we've also had infiltration from UKIP. And so there's a very big group who really want to have a no deal within the membership. And that does not reflect the wishes of the average voter, as we saw with these European elections, for example. We saw that there's a big loss from the Conservative votes towards the Remain parties. And this creates a situation where I really do not see that the Conservative Party will be electable if it goes with a hard Brexit candidate. So I would love to avoid a general election at all costs.
Right. Patrick?
I think a second referendum is a much more, preferred outcome to option for dealing with this.
Right. Writing in the Telegraph, Patrick, Boris Johnson saying the message of the European election results is clear. If we go on like this, we will be dismissed. After these dismal elections, we need a proper Brexit and a fresh agenda to reunite the country. Patrick, is that Boris just being opportunistic, or does he have a point?
I think that is Boris just playing to the membership. All the candidates are playing to the membership. But what we have seen with the results last night is that the membership is they have different wishes to the Conservative voter. So we must also think about how the party reaches out to its lost voter base. With its aging membership, aging support base, it really needs to start reaching out to younger people. It's lost business support. It's losing the support of ethnic minorities. So I would like to see a candidate who can have such a vision, who can build a better, who can promising better for the future for our party and for our country.
Bilal, has Corbyn been the right guy
Entirely,
at the wheel, given that the Tories have self-imploded over the past few months with every single vote that got rejected, that May had tabled in Parliament and so on? Is Corbyn the right guy to capitalise on that for Labour?
Certainly, I think all major parties last night suffered losses that they hadn't expected, and that was unfortunate. But it seems to be that Brexit has taken on a life of its own and has expanded beyond the traditional party stance. What I would say, just on the just to go back on the membership of the Conservative Party, is that regardless of their demographic, one of Theresa May's legacies for the past 2 years is that she has been trying to sell a form of Brexit that is painless, that is free, and that does everything we want and is totally one-sided. And because of that, it has engendered a sense of impossibility, that there is no real way to deliver the Brexit that Theresa May promised and who her successor will undoubtedly try and claim to be able to do. And so the real problem that we're facing is not just the types of people who are selecting this candidate, but what this candidate will be selling. And so that's the first point. Moving on to what Jeremy Corbyn could be doing. Look, I think Labour had a difficult life last night. We are more so now, I think, than maybe the Conservative Party, faced with a difficult situation as to where we stand on not just the referendum, but as a party of Remain and Reform or as a leaving party. That's because of the nature of our demographics as traditional voters, whether they be in cities or they're in the northeast. And it requires a lot of soul searching for us, and I think we do need to find more of a clearer voice as to where we stand on this. But the wider point is that Brexit is beyond almost a policy debate anymore. It's a value debate. It's about what type of world we want to live in. And people have been, for the past 2 years, sold a Brexit that has become more and more impossible, that the divide between the two sides has become, the gap has become almost unbridgeable. And I think we're in a more difficult place now than we were at the day after the referendum.
Roger Alton, has the gap become unbridgeable? Is the country as divided as it ever has been?
It's the most disunited. We are the disunited kingdom. You can't really imagine anything quite as divided as we are. And look at Scotland, for example, where the which has obviously voted to stay, Brexit and UKIP polled very, very, very low, about I think 18 to 20% in Scotland. The rest will all remain. So if we press ahead with this, so other speakers have very cogently argued, with a harsh red meat type Brexit promised by Nigel Farage on the one hand, and by implication Boris, though I sort of somehow doubt it, but he's seen as the sort of red meat, hard, no deal, let's get out and sail on the high seas of freedom. Fat chance and good luck with that. I think it has to be something much more centrist, much more restrained. I hope Jeremy Hunt. The other alternative, it seems to me, is you have a general election and you possibly move towards revoking, because At some point, I think that's what will have to happen. We've made no progress. We're bitterly divided. It has become, in a sense, of value. Brexit defines the sort of person you are, and if we can revoke, then maybe we can start to get back together.
So, Patrick, the ideal scenario for you...
difficult,
sorry, Bilal. We're bringing you in a second, Bilal. Patrick, would the ideal scenario for you be a general election and a people's vote on Brexit at the same time, get it all sorted out once and for all?
No, I think I would like to avoid a general election. We've got enough problems as it is at the moment. I think there is a need for a second referendum, or rather a confirmatory referendum of whatever the government comes up with. We need to, because the issue is not just do we have Brexit, it's actually what kind of Brexit do we have? And who decides what that Brexit is? What is clear is that what people were promised in 2016, that is not on offer. I mean, people also imagined their own fantasy versions of what could happen with Brexit. And we need something that is clearly defined, that is deliverable, and that needs to be run past the people. And I think a general election is not in the interest of the country or the two major parties who are suffering because they have basically gone for a compromise which is unpopular with the electorate, and everything's quite distorted. I would just love to see clarity on the Brexit question so we can go beyond that. I think that's the most important thing. We need to get this Brexit out of the way to get back to normal politics and deal with the things that really matter in this country.
Bilal, would you accept that? A people's vote or a confirmatory referendum, whatever you want to call it, but no general election and the Tories still in charge?
So the Labour Party policy has been that they seek a general election first, and failing that, if they're not able to achieve that, that they seek a second vote or a confirmatory vote. My personal opinion is, I think I agree largely with the other speakers, is that the nature of Brexit has required that a form of confirmatory vote or a people's vote is almost a necessity. More than just answering the question of Brexit, it perhaps provides some form of finality. Just on the way here, listening to the radio, you hear people who were hugely in favour of Brexit and want to do so. A lot of these people feel that the only reason why they haven't achieved, in some cases, the fantasy idea of what Brexit is through conspiracy or incompetence. And I think that a chance of having a confirmatory vote of people's choice where there is a clear option, there is a definable, tangible form of what Brexit would look like, versus the alternative, which is the status quo, something like that on offer allows people's minds to focus. And I think that's the key about the reason why people will be supportive around a people's vote.
Roger Alton, let me ask you the big picture question. You've been around for a long time.
Sorry.
Where did it all go wrong?
Well, I'm pro-European. I think Europe is a rather good thing. So, but there's a huge minority in this country. I would have said roughly maybe a third, maybe a little bit more, who don't like Europe and will sort of never like Europe, will never come round to that idea. They believe in British exceptionalism, like to quote the Second World War, and so on and so forth. So whether that gap is bridgeable, whereas I think we should be an outward-looking country, open to foreign influences, foreign ideas. And of course, Europe itself is falling prey to these insular, slightly xenophobic tendencies, as was shown in the vote yesterday. I hope it hasn't gone wrong for good. I really hope it hasn't gone wrong for good, because this is, I think, the strength lies in togetherness, and strength lies in being open-minded and outward-looking. I'd be very wary about a second vote, a people's referendum again, because it didn't do very well the first time.
And just as I wrap up, Patrick, are you going to miss Theresa May?
Well, I would love to say yes, but I think the whole country is tired of her. She did try her best, but I was upset to see how upset she was the other day, but I won't miss her.
Bilal Mahmood, are you going to miss her? Presumably not.
I think a lot of people were talking about how she was dealt a bad hand and how she had some of the most difficult circumstances in recent memory. Let's remember, she chose that. She put her name up to be Prime Minister during Brexit. She was fully aware of what was happening. And I think, as Roger spoke about earlier, she had ample opportunity to create more of a conciliatory effort of understanding how to negotiate with the European Union. what I think her legacy, notwithstanding things like Grenfell and also Windrush, which we haven't talked about here, has been creating a sense for Brexiteers that there is this free, perfect form of Brexit that exists, and the only thing that's stopping it are politicians. And the truth is to create that form of Brexit doesn't exist and creates such divisions within our society
Absolutely.
to try and achieve that. It's making life and society's Britain far worse. I think very briefly the question of where did this all begin? I think this is beyond Brexit. This is about fundamentally a sense of otherness, a sense of what do we see our society to be, and many people feeling that they couldn't speak out on issues, whether it be immigration, whether it be about equality, whether it be about integration. And I think over the past decades, certain people have felt life slip away from them, or the way that they see Britain slip away from them, and it has caused a form of discord. And I think the key about this, regardless of how Brexit ends up, is about building another sense of the British identity, where we belong in the world, what we look like, what we sound like. Because I think until that's resolved, we are always going to have a form of a permutation of the nastiness that Brexit has formed.
Okay, building a better sense of a British identity. That's beyond the scope of my program, and I've got to wrap. But gentlemen, it's been a pleasure having you all on. Patrick Lohlein, Bilal Mahmood, and Roger Alton. Thanks again.
Thank you.